In this week's episode of the Breakout Growth Podcast, Ethan Garr and I chat with Tim Flaherty, Chief Financial Officer of Enable Injections. So if you have family or friends who have lived with health conditions that require infusions, then you're probably going to be aware of how disruptive that can be to their lives. Enable Injections is working to change that with this ingenious medical device that could potentially reduce that burden to a simple and effective at-home process. So Ethan, what stood out to you from this interview?
You know, Sean, MedTech is such a different animal for us. I didn't really know what to expect coming into this, but I feel like when you and I get out of our comfort zone a little bit, we end up learning so much.
Right.
So, I was hoping we'd be able to use this time with Tim just to see how the CFO role through, what it looks like through this other lens, and that angle would end up being interesting for our listeners. And I think on that front, I think this really delivers. So I think it was actually a really fun and interesting conversation. You probably noticed that Tim kept talking about the people who have to live with infusions and how this could change their lives. Really, it was the same thing we always hear with, companies that are really growing fast. The mission is behind the business is what really counts. And just reinforced that regardless of the industry, what matters is the impact the impact your work has on other people's lives.
Definitely. At the other end of the telescope is a human being and a challenge. Your job is to make their lives better. So if you saw the title of this episode and you thought, oh boy, here we go, CFO equals bean counter, big yawn, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. Tim focuses on designing a financial strategy that ensures that Enable Injections will remain on sound footing through each phase of the long and complex process of getting a pharmaceutical product to market. They've actually raised more than $400 million. And that's really trying to set them up for the rocket ship type growth that they're expecting once they have those regulatory approvals.
Yeah, Tim definitely doesn't make you feel like it's just nuts and bolts and, numbers. He really brought it to life. And, this is definitely a different process than what most of the tech companies we talk to usually have. They don't go through this kind of regulatory process and all that. But I think it just shows why the CFO role is just so important in a business, and also multifaceted. There's some excellent insights in this conversation on who should hire a CFO, when you should hire a CFO, what that role should look like, and what that position should achieve over time. And I think that carries across industries and markets, and it'll be really interesting for our listeners.
For sure. In my interim head of growth roles, I often have the opportunity to interface with CFOs, and I've learned just how important and vital that role is in growth. So if you're starting to get beyond that stage where finances are more than just administrative and you're thinking about who can help you get to the next level, I think you're going to find this super interesting. But before we jump in with Tim, we want to invite our listeners to check out this week's sponsor for the Breakout Growth Podcast, and it's SAP. They're back. It's great to have them back on board as a sponsor. They are the world's leading provider of enterprise application software, enabling hyper-growth companies to scale quickly to achieve their growth ambitions with their agile, cost-effective, easy-to-implement cloud solutions. So if you're working to power breakout growth success in your business, please check out sap.com/SME.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks to SAP for rejoining us as a sponsor. And Sean, I think we should probably just jump right in with Tim.
Yeah, let's do it. Hi, Tim. Welcome to the Breakout Growth Podcast.
Hey, Sean. Great to be here. Very excited about the opportunity.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on, and I'm joined by my co-host, Ethan Garr. Hey, Ethan.
Hey, Sean. Hey, Tim. Good to see both of you.
Nice to meet you, Ethan.
Thank you.
Yeah, so most of our listeners are not going to be familiar with Enable Injections. So would you be able to give us a quick overview of the company and maybe a bit about what the products are that you develop?
Sure. So Enable Injections is located in Cincinnati, Ohio. We consider ourselves a bio-MedTech hybrid, and we are actually developing a device to revolutionize medicine. And I'll tell a couple stories, and I think it'll resonate. So we actually have a friend who has a teenage son who has Crohn's disease. The mom basically told me that every 5 to 6 weeks, they have to pull their son out of school to take him to the infusion clinic. So one of the parents has to take off school. They take the son to the infusion clinic, and they will not prepare the drug for the infusion until you actually arrive. So the drug gets ordered. You have to sit in this cold, dreary infusion clinic next to other sick people waiting for your drug to show up. In addition to that, with a COVID pandemic, you can only imagine they've missed some of their treatments because they just didn't want to be in the hospital.
Yeah.
Also, the son has a needle phobia, so the hospital uses a therapy dog to help with that, which you can imagine the therapy dog sometimes gets double booked, shows up late. So the timing of this infusion, the time starts to stack up before they actually get their infusion. If everything goes according to plan, they show up, they start to give the infusion, but then, they have to find a vein. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 tries, and a lot of times this gets delayed and it gets canceled and they have to reschedule. So they're losing, best case, if everything goes okay, you're talking 6-8 hours of their day every 5 weeks. And sometimes it's multiple days. And they're afraid that their son's not even going to be able to go away to college. We believe our device will solve this problem. A couple more stories so you can relate. My wife's aunt has rheumatoid arthritis. She's retired. She loves to travel. She has to get an infusion every 6 weeks, 8 weeks. She has to schedule her life around an infusion. And we know a patient, a 2-year-old boy in West Virginia that has a genetic disorder. His parents have to drive him to Cincinnati, Ohio every week and take 2 days off work so he can get his infusion. And the father ended up losing his job because of it.
Wow. Yeah.
It sounds like super impactful if your device is able to solve those problems. I mean, obviously, the impact, it's not just, I think, the time and the disruption, but it's also just like if you step back from that, it's the quality of life that you're actually trying to solve for people, which I think is incredible and really important. And I think, so for our listeners, this is probably a bit of a departure, medical and pharmaceutical, not what we're usually talking about, but I think Sean and I have found that when we go out of our comfort zone and talk to companies that are different from what we sometimes learn a lot. And I thought what would be really interesting would be to dive into your role as chief financial officer. A lot of startups don't start with a chief financial officer. It comes later, but we really think the chief financial officer role can be really important in growth. So I wanted to find out from you, first of all, do you think like the chief financial officer role, whether you're in pharmaceuticals, whether you're in big tech, whether you're in retail businesses, is there a common thread like that makes it always important in growth?
Well, it's ironic you bring up this subject because, big tech and pharma are, they have deep pockets, right? And honestly, the big tech has a larger balance sheet than the pharmaceutical companies, and mainly because of the time to market and the FDA approvals. You can explain a pharmaceutical career being the time it develops a drug to get to market. So the big tech, they can develop technology quicker, and that's why their balance sheets are 3x compared to the pharmaceutical companies. But if you look at these areas, the big tech are starting to come into healthcare because they think they can disrupt the digital technology. The global healthcare market's going to be a $15 trillion market by 2030. And you're starting to see Apple and Google starting to buy up healthcare companies. And we're actually developing a Bluetooth technology, which is going to be a next gen in our device. It's going to be a Band-Aid, smart Band-Aid. So after you put our device on, you'll remove it and the Band-Aid will stay on your body, and we'll be able to see, are you taking your injection? Is it going okay? And then, by the way, if you're in the clinic and you go home, the doc can read, some of the biometrics So this is just unbelievable. And then call you on telemedicine and say, hey, Sean, looks like you're having an infection flare up. You need to come back to the clinic. So we really think that this is going to be very impactful, and we're looking at developing that now. So I think it's exciting where the CFO role really has to, I think, play in the future in both areas. And it's a very high tech, high cost, market.
And so is the CFO role part of it helping to lead the efforts on actual fundraising as well, so that you keep those coffers full enough to not just manage the cash, but replenish the cash while you bring in new products to market?
For sure. So when I started with Enable, it was in 2015. We had 10 people. We raised about $8 million in seed capital. Since I've been with the company, we've raised over $400 million in funding, 295 in equity, 35 million in non-dilutive venture debt, and then also 90 million in pharmaceutical milestones, because we'll actually develop the product specific for the drug, and the pharmaceutical companies will pay us to develop that device. Mm-hmm. So it's a very expensive market and environment. And, since we are a hybrid type business, we have a lot of areas that a pharmaceutical company has and a MedTech company has. So we have human factors. We support with the clinical trials and the training. And then we also are designing, developing, and manufacturing a device that's never been out there. There's nothing like it in the world. We can infuse biologics from 5 ml to 25 ml. And a lot of the science, they did not even believe that you could do anything over 3 to 5 ml. And we have successful clinical trials with people getting infused up to 50 ml. And it's funny because some of them are like, your device is not working. And we're like, yes, you're being infused with the drug. Can you imagine that compared to getting an IV? It's just, it sends chills up my spine.
What is the difference? What is the difference between an IV and an infusion?
So I'll show you. So here's our device. It's a cute little non-intimidating device. And basically what we do is we build the device. We'll ship it to the pharmaceutical company. They'll fill a syringe or a vial with their drug. They'll package it together, and that will go to like a Walgreens. The patient will go, they'll pick up their drug, they'll put it in the refrigerator. When they need to use it, they'll pull it out, they'll put it in the injector, they'll fill it up. When they're done, they pull it out of the injector. They put this on the abdomen. They push the button. A small little needle comes out, goes into your abdomen, and then it will infuse the drug exactly and specifically for that drug because we build it that way. It's very discreet. People don't even know you're doing it. I could be driving to work. I could be sitting in the office.
Wow.
And then there's no lights. There's no button or blender type communication. Some of the other devices, they have motors and they're just very loud. When it's done, the button pops and you can keep it on your abdomen if you're not available to dispose of it. And then when you're ready, you just peel it off and you put it in a Sharps container or you throw it away. It just has adhesive on the back, just like a Band-Aid.
Okay. So for most of our people are listening and not watching, but this is a good excuse to highlight that we do offer our podcast now on YouTube as well. So anyone who wants to see the visuals on there, but I think the explanation was pretty clear for people. So the real trade-off then is people sitting in that clinic for a long time and all the travel time to that clinic versus more of a kind of just do-it-yourself solution now to achieve results. Is that a good shorthand, or am I missing something there?
It is. So you're giving people their lives back, the time to go to the clinic, the time to get the injection, the pain to get the injection, You know, and we've coined the term anywhere care. So
Okay.
you can do this in the clinic, you can do it at a Walgreens, you can do it at home, and that is really the value proposition. And then with our additional Bluetooth technology, you can incorporate the telehealth and the doc compliance. So, you know, we found through clinical trials that there's few adverse events, no injection issues. You know, people prefer our device, and just think of the healthcare cost and savings of not having to go to an infusion clinic.
Perfect. Yeah. So then one last kind of question on the product area is you've talked a lot about the clinical trial side of things. So is the product commercially available yet, or is it still going through clinical trials?
So it is. We're close to our first partner submission, and we're hoping that we could be approved as soon as next year and on the market.
Okay, so then from a running the business perspective, you've touched on this, but it's really a series of milestones and things coming out of these clinical trials that essentially have opened the door to the funding that you've been able to bring along the way. But it's such a different growth story than we're used to in terms of like, you know, most of the time it's kind of market risk and not kind of product viability risk and approval risk. And so, but I think the CFO role is then particularly interesting in that place, because you really want to be able to direct funds toward moving the process along and hopefully have some fuel in the tank as you get that approval to be able to really bring it to market. But obviously, once you get the approval, probably that unlocks a whole new set of funds.
Well, it's interesting because this business is time and money, right? And you're dealing with pharmaceutical, it's a business to business, and we can't control a lot of the timelines, and we can't control the FDA. So we have to be able to flex when it's accordingly. So we either have to tighten the belt or invest drastically, because we're talking millions of devices a year for just one drug. So when we hit the market, we have to take off like a rocket ship. So when we go fundraising, we make sure that we have enough to weather the storms and meet the deadlines and invest to scale this business. You know, we've already invested $60 million in our manufacturing capabilities, and we've already invested in semi-automated production lines. And we also invested in, you know, the top of the line systems like SAP. So we're FDA compliant and ready to go when we hit the market.
So the production investment, sorry, Ethan, I know you need to get in there, but the production investment's a really interesting one. So that is, I assume you need some production for the clinical trials, but like super scalable production, it kind of reminds me of in the startup world. There's kind of a famous story around Webvan. I don't know if you ever heard that, but it was I think they had invested like upwards of $1 billion in kind of the infrastructure for a grocery delivery service that ultimately once they launched, the market demand really wasn't there, and they'd put so much into kind of the infrastructure around it, so that instead of the kind of that's led to a more lean approach in the tech startup world, where it's like validate market demand, validate need before market demand. Like in your case, you clearly have identified need, and so again, it's more product and approval risk there. But I'm curious on why the big manufacturing investment at this stage.
Because when we get approved, we're going to be launching with millions of units. So, you know, if you have a small clinical line and you're doing 20,000, 30,000, it would be fine. But to scale and do millions of devices, you have to be ready to go. Now, at our current location, we'll be able to do 3 million units a year, and we'll be able to ship out of Enable. But when we get to millions, we're going to bring on contract manufacturing. So we'll have business continuity and also that scalability. And we'll be able to replicate our automated lines at the contract manufacturer. So we are being wise to make sure that we have enough capacity to, launch right out of Enable. But the good thing with these timelines, you can think of by time you engage a pharma to launch, it's usually a 4-year development cycle, and then it's another 4 years for manufacturing ramp. So there is time to put things in place.
So what's interesting to me is when I think about pharmaceuticals, typically, a pharmaceutical company is developing a drug, and I would think that it's sort of top down. They're marketing to doctors, and doctors are then saying, "Oh, this looks like the right solution to a problem for my patient." But in this case, the way you've described this, the real value, a doctor prescribing through this mechanism, I'm sure there's savings and things like that, but the clinics aren't going to love this. This is how they make their money. But my question is, as you go to market, is a big push for this going to be to go directly to consumers and the patients in the world and say, hey, there's now a better way you can do this, to try to work a bottom-up approach to getting them to push their doctors to get them your product, or will it follow the more traditional means?
So today, usually through clinical trials, a lot of the patients are demanding products like this. And in addition to that, the payers are pushing home health care. So you're already seeing healthcare moving from the infusion clinics to the home because of the savings in payer costs. And then in addition to that, the most reasons people don't get better is because of compliance. And you add in a pandemic. So this is going to add a ton of compliance. People are going to adhere to their medications better. They're going to get their quality of life back, and the payers are going to win in the long run, and so are the patients. And that's why we've coined the term anywhere care, because we believe that we can create more throughput in the clinic, because it doesn't take a chair and it doesn't take a nurse to use our device. You could actually go in the clinic, an admin could slap it on. You could go in the coffee shop, come back, the doc could peel it off, say, oh, you look good, you can go home. So if we can create more throughput in the clinic, that's good for the docs and everyone around, because you're not taking up all that capacity and chair time. And there's a nurse shortages now. And, it's just, healthcare is a tough place to be these days.
So it seemed to me as a CFO, I think you mentioned this already, but like your job really is about not just thinking about the present, but really about the future steps that are going to make this successful. Is that accurate? That you're thinking about the marketing of this, even though it's not necessarily time to market this?
Exactly. As a CFO, I like to say I have to wear a lot of hats. I'm wearing the compliance hat, the strategic visionary hat, the business partner to the CFO, the shareholders, and this is uncharted waters for all of us. So understanding the market and how we can flex is very important, because it's a $568 billion biologics market, and we like to look at ourselves as an index fund, and each of the drugs are at different phases in their development. Some are already sub-Q, they're just using a pump. Some are IV, they need to convert to sub-Q, and some of them are in phase 2 or 3. So we have to be able to manage this index fund based on key inflection points and when we think the pharma partners are going to hit. And as they start to stack up, then you can really see the value take off, but it does take time and money, as I said. So I have to look forward. I have to also build a business that doesn't exist. So I have to hire the right people. I have to build a manufacturing capability. I have to create departments that never, ever existed. So it's not an easy role by any means to be doing all of this it's design, develop, and create manufacturing capability for a product that's never been out there. Plus these areas that, companies have never had before. So this hybrid bio med tech is new for everybody, including the FDA.
It sounds very much like the chaos of breakout growth. When growth is going fast, it's chaotic, and the roles are always changing. But I guess I work with the company, and we tongue in cheek sometimes refer to he's not technically the chief financial officer, but the finance guy, as the Department of No. And I think, and he's actually very much the Department of Yes, and really trying to make things work. But how do you balance? I mean, you have a limited amount of money. It sounds like you've raised quite a bit, but you have a limited amount of money, and you're budgeting that money for the future in many, as we've talked about. So you're thinking these 3, 4, 5, 10 steps ahead. And right now the money's probably all going in one direction, and it's not the one you want. How do you balance that with the needs of all the individuals and teams in your business asking for funds to do different things to keep the business moving forward? How do you, in your role, think about those and make those decisions?
So we have a very rigorous budgeting process, and I think getting in front of this early is important. And also, I have a team that they're not just accountants and finance people, they're business folks, and they really get in and spend time understanding the business. And so when we get through the budgeting process, there is investment in scaling, but there also is day-to-day budgeting for the departments, and then there also is infrastructure growth. What's interesting is we only know what we know, right? And we're a very fluid business. So being the CFO, I have to be very flexible in what our budget looks like today is probably not what it's going to look like in a month or two. What we are good at is staying within the dollars in our plan, but flexing on where the priorities are as they come up. And that's the key here, because, we need to make sure that we keep our runway a certain amount to get us to profitability and sustainability. And then the pharma partner milestones are gravy on top of that, which just help extend our runway from a non-dilutive standpoint.
So when you're kind of looking at the stage that you're at right now, I know anytime it's in kind of the pharmaceutical space, that so much of it is this big investment in developing something that will work, and there's protections around that IP to encourage people to make that investment. And I know in the, or at least I believe that I've heard that in the just pure drug space, that a lot of it's a kind of a window of a patent on the back end. That eventually it kind of becomes, some of these things open up to generics. And so is that part of the reason too for building that manufacturing capacity, so that as soon as you get that approval, you have that window to be able to maximize the opportunity, or am I looking at that wrong?
No, you're looking at it correctly. So if you think of, our device gets approved with the drug, and usually the patent life is 10 to 15 years. So the contracts are very sticky. Once the pharma partner spends tens of millions of dollars on clinical trials, they're sort of married to our product. And then, their precious drugs are, $5 to $10 billion drugs. So we have to make sure that they're protected in our device, not only from a device standpoint, but, systematically through traceability and SAP. And so that is, definitely part of it.
Mm. So it's definitely, and go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but, and also we have exclusivity contracts. So if you think of this, there's usually 4 drugs that do the same thing. And we basically partner with one of the the 3 or 4 pharma companies, and they pay us exclusivity and royalties to help differentiate them. So when you go down to see your doc, he says, okay, Sean, you can have this device and do it at home sub-Q, or you have these 3 that you're going to have to go get an IV.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the value proposition and the sticky contracts, 10 to 15 years.
Mm-hmm. So you really want to be having all of that planning ahead of time, and with you have to plan for success. You don't want to optimize for, if things don't work, then there's not really like a good exit path. But so in planning for that success, it's really you're going through a lot of building that growth engine in anticipation of the day it gets released, and or it gets approved. So one of the things that you had talked about is that there's a big B2B component there. And so are you talking about with the B2B component, is that more the pharmaceutical partner, or is that clinics, or a combination?
So that is the pharmaceutical partner. So we partner with a pharmaceutical company on a specific drug or molecule. We build the device specific for that molecule, and the pharmaceutical company basically spends all the money on the clinical trials, and then we'll support with training. And then we're partnered together as a combination product, and that's really the business. The beauty of our model is we're not spending money on clinical trials, and we're also accepting the pharma partners' container closure. So a lot of device companies, they have to invest in filling lines and manufacturing lines for the drug. So they have to bring the drug in. They have to make sure they have the sterile environments. We don't do any of that. We basically ship the device to the pharma company. They marry it to their drug. It goes to the Walgreens. The patient goes, picks it up, and then they fill it on their own timeline.
And I'm sorry, just one more follow-up. On the clinical trial side, like what type of volume are you usually looking at? Like, is there quite a bit of volume that you need to support there, and does that require a lot of marketing behind it, or is it relatively low volume?
So it depends on the drug, and honestly, it depends on the phase of the drug. So, if the drug's already approved sub-Q and it's already being administered by a pump, all you have to do is prove our device does the same thing. So it could be as small as 20 patients,
mm-hmm.
but the time is still long. It could be a year or 2. And then some of the drugs that they've just gotten approved, and it's a new drug to the market. The clinicals could be hundreds of thousands of devices over 2 or 3 years with, hundreds of thousands of patients as well. So again, it just depends on the drug, and some drugs are orphan drugs, some are high volume drugs, some require fewer patients, but what's in common is time and money. It just seems like the trials take long, and they cost a lot.
And how big is the overall team? Sorry, just to get kind of an idea of like the dedicated team, because I know that through partnerships it probably extends quite a bit.
So when you say overall team, do you mean total employees in the company?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have about 200 employees. We roughly have 7 partners, and so we divide our workforce, our BD, our quality, our regulatory, between the different partners. And then finance, accounting, IT, we're pretty lean and mean. We have about 10 or 12 folks.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously we're preparing for, long-term IPOs. So,
Sure.
That could quadruple overnight. And, I've just hired a right-hand senior director because I need to focus on the innovation and the valuation and not so much the day-to-day. So mm-hmm. I'm ready to work with the bankers, the analysts, and get us ready.
So I was curious, the last few years obviously upended the world, and you've talked about time as being time and money. It would obviously you can't make this get approved any faster. So even though this would have been, I'm sure, hugely valuable in the middle of the pandemic when people really couldn't go and sit in the clinic safely, does the fact that we went through that help drive change in your trajectory? Does it accelerate things because there's now a different mindset in the world around the importance of being able to have things like this in your home?
What it has done is made awareness of how important being in the home is, because when we were marketing the product before the pandemic, people were sort of like, well, so what, at home? But now they can really see the value proposition of, if people don't have to go in the hospital, they can do this at home. Wow, look at the benefit. In addition to that, it's opened the eyes of the FDA. So we're definitely seeing expedited approvals, and the timelines are being shortened because they know the value of getting these kind of products out into the market. So it's definitely helped.
So
That's awesome. Go ahead.
So what becomes at this point, have the biggest headwinds that you're fighting, have they changed for you over the last few years? Or like what, as CFO, like what are the big challenges that you're trying to overcome, and have those evolved?
So a lot of the headwinds, are somewhat the same. We really need to get our first approval. The thing is getting as many pharma partners stacked up so we have multiple shots on goal, because as you were speaking, if one falls off or there's a drastic change in timeline, that we can adjust the levers and bring in different partners. The good thing is, our first approval, we believe that, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Again, the company started in 2010. We thought it was going to be a lot quicker than it is. So we've learned a lot over the time, but here we are in 2022, and we see the things starting to stack up. So it's very refreshing.
I'm curious if you've been on this journey in other pharma companies, or what was your background pre joining this company?
Well, it's funny you bring that up. So Mike Hooven, the founder of Enable Injections, he started a company called AtriCure and Enable Medical back in the 90s. And Mike actually hired me in the early 2000s to work with him at AtriCure. And I was part of the IPO process with AtriCure, and AtriCure is now a $2.3 billion market cap company, and they sell devices to treat atrial fibrillation. So Mike is very successful, and he's just, it's unbelievable, his mindset on coming up with new technologies. So.
And do you feel like it's a specialized skill then to be a CFO in managing this process? Because clearly it's very different when you have to stay really lean, but you need to prepare for that big milestone. Does that take a really unique kind of CFO skill?
It's definitely a unique environment. So if you look at my background, you would find that, I've probably managed almost every function in a company: HR, IT, supply chain, customer service. I'm a very strong accountant by trade, also self-taught on the finance side, a lot of the fundraising. And so you have to have that breadth of experience, financial modeling, business partner, where a lot of companies, they have a CFO with one skill set. They're very strong on an audit compliance standpoint and an accounting standpoint, or they're very strong at financial modeling and visionary. But in our business, you have to be a jack of all trades, and you have to be able to delegate, and you have to be able to flex when it's appropriate. And the hard part is, when we had 10 employees, I was the one setting up the computers and doing QuickBooks. And now I'm delegating, building teams, and, raising value for the business.
So with that breadth of skills, if you were advising, a startup really across any industry, but we talk to tech startup, high tech startups all the time. Is there, at what point would you say it's time to really think about hiring a CFO, and what would be the core skills that you think would be really important to look for in hiring that role?
So I think it's really when the tipping point is from the day-to-day bookkeeping and accounting to more strategic decision making. So, doing strategic planning, starting to do fundraising, starting to look at building market share, growing the business. That's really when you need to start looking. And, it depends on the type of business. Some need to invest in CFOs sooner. Some need to, if you're a widget company and you're pretty mature, you probably can get away with a very skilled controller unless you're looking for M&A or growth. And in our case, I was hired early. I was number 10, and I was the person building a strategic plan from scratch because we just landed our first pharma partner and we wanted to aggressively start going after new business. So it was not about the day-to-day bookkeeping. It was really about, how do we take off?
What do you think CFOs get wrong? Or what do you think companies get wrong in hiring CFOs?
Well, I think what a lot of CFOs get wrong is they're very much cut cost, stick to the budget. They don't want to invest. They just want to, manage the purse strings. And what a good CFO needs to realize is when to invest, because if you get behind the curve, in our case, you're talking a $500 billion market. And if we're not ready to go, you can imagine every day delay on a pharmaceutical drug is millions of dollars. And so we don't want to penny pinch, and we don't want to save a buck here and there on a head count or a manufacturing line. And that's not easy for a lot of CFOs. Right. I invested in SAP soon after I started, and there'd be a lot of CFOs that would have a hard time spending, $5 million on SAP. They'd be like, well, let's just wait. Well, and SAP loves us because we're one of the first adopters of SAP. But again, we're a highly regulated FDA environment, and we have to be ready to go when we flip the switch. We don't have time to use QuickBooks and then figure it out later. So that's where I think a lot of CFOs get it wrong. They struggle on taking risk and investing when it might seem too early.
So it's just that optimization for success, but balanced again, having enough runway to ultimately still be hanging around when that success comes.
Well, the beauty of that is, SAP, if I had to do a big bang approach and invest $5 million out of the gate, there's no way I could do it. So SAP now has a phased approach. I've been implementing SAP for 5 years now, and I'm just bringing on the modules as I need them. Mm-hmm. And I've been able to spread my cash flow based on different fundraising events. So, it's worked out fantastic, but you have to get creative and you have to know what questions to ask. And to your point, you have to know where to balance the checkbook, because some things probably have to give, and then others you got to take the risk.
So one of the questions that we like to wrap up with is usually we ask it as, what do you understand about growth now that you feel like you didn't understand as well a couple of years ago? But I'm going to twist it slightly to looking at, having gone through a similar journey in the previous company to a fantastic outcome. What were the things that you took from that experience that caused you to do things differently this time?
So people are so important, and I think a lot of companies underestimate people. In our business, finding the right people, putting them in the right seats on the bus, making sure that you find the strategic visionaries to take you to the next step, because getting people aligned and having that vision is so important. And I found in the past, and I've learned that, I was sort of I struggled with onboarding heads and the cost, and I was like, well, we'll hire the resources when we need them. I was more focused on the infrastructure more so than the people, and I'm all about getting the right people as soon as you can, and everything else will fall into place.
Well, so my big takeaway from this conversation is really, and then I'd love to hear what yours is, Ethan. But my big takeaway is really that in kind of the type of tech companies that Ethan and I have worked with, where it's whether it's consumer tech or B2B, but it's something where again you have an idea, you prototype the idea, you get it into people's hands. It's a very incremental business where as you get that validation, you keep turning up the knobs to drive more and more growth. But it's as a result, like you want to make sure you have scalable systems that sort of support you as you go along. But it's a little more of a kind of reactive growth process where I think in your case, it's so much of like just preparing for that day where, so it's so mission driven. Yeah. I hear so much passion as you talk around about the business, and preparing for the day where you can really start to make a big dent in the problem that you're solving, and just laying that whole foundation so that in one day you're operating at mass scale really quickly. And it takes a lot of kind of proactive planning and preparation for that point. That's kind of my big takeaway. I don't know if you have any, if I'm looking at that maybe a bit wrong, you can give that feedback, and then I'd love to hear Ethan's as well.
You're absolutely right. The passion of knowing that you're going to change someone's life. We've had mothers breaking down, crying, saying, when can you get this product to market? My kid can finally go away to college. It's more than a job to me. It's being in an industry that is going to change the world. And that's what I love about it. So, and I get to do what I enjoy, on the financial aspect. And I love growing businesses. I love wearing a lot of hats. And so, to find my home in where I grew up and be able to do it here is fantastic. So.
I always love hearing the human side, like people who are involved in businesses like this talk about their passion for it, because I think, it's easy. Like, people always talk about, oh, the government does this or the government does that. I'm like, well, you should meet my brother. He works in the government. I think he's really passionate about what he does. And you'll hear, people will talk about big pharma or, big tech, and they may get a sense of, but when I talk to you and I hear what you're saying, again, like to Sean's point, it sounds like at the end of the day, you see a person sitting in a clinic having a better life if you are successful. And I really, I think Sean and I always believe that companies that are mission driven are the ones that succeed. So it's neat to hear that in this context as well. But I think one of the things that stuck with me from this discussion is just as CFO, again, like, people can think of the CFO as, the nuts and bolts, the bookkeeping, the QuickBooks side of the business. But you made this point that really your job is to keep the company ahead of the curve. And it's a lot costlier to fall behind than any of the cuts you might make to save a few bucks here and there. So I think the penny wise, pound foolish cliche, I mean, it seems like the CFO role is all about finding the right person who is willing to take risks and willing to push the business forward, but to do that within the context of like, how do we manage from point A to point B? How do we manage to success and to growth? So it was really great stuff. I really appreciated it.
And it's about finding the right mentors and people that are great business partners that can bring you along. I've learned a lot from my mentors, and, I didn't always have these skill sets. So, finding the right person to help you develop and become that, well-rounded person is important because, coming out of that, glorified controller type accounting mindset is not an easy one to overcome.
Absolutely. Well, it's such an awesome story. Thank you, Tim, so much for, taking the time to share how you're preparing for growth and just navigating the full process with Enable Injections. And we're really looking forward to seeing you continue on that journey and hopefully help a lot of people through the process. So for everyone tuning in, thank you for listening.
Thank you.